everyone. I'm Amanda, and it's great to be back with you. I gotta tell you, I checked a bunch of big things off my list in the last week. In one day, I had a dentist appointment, my annual physical, and conferences with my kids' teacher. And I host an event at my house, and I'm here just like check, check, check. It is such a good feeling to have tasks you're responsible for and to complete them, that closure. But I have discovered, like you probably have, that parenthood offers very little of that linear sense of accomplishment. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is super rewarding to see your children grow and develop and learn. But we are playing the long game here. Parenthood is putting in the time, it's creating consistency. You are, even when you are doing the day-to-day sort of stuff, right? It's like you're feeding kids and wiping bottoms and making sure naps happen again and snacks and feeding them again. It's constant. That was a real challenge for me as I transitioned from the check it off your list sort of accomplishments of school and then working in a career to being home full time with my kids. Sometimes I would look around the room at the end of the day and I would feel so overwhelmed and so overstimulated and feel like it looks the same as when we started this morning. Like it's still chaotic. I don't have anything to show for myself. And I really struggled with that. So I want to share this excerpt from my journal. I want to be clear, I don't journal all the time. This is from 2018, and I was in the thick of it. My kids were 1, 3, and 5 almost, and I was reading this devotion called Out of the Spin Cycle that I loved so much I gave as gifts sometimes. It was targeted at mothers of littles. And I wrote, today's devotion was titled Hidden Surprises, and it was about how we plant kingdom principles in our children, but don't see the results, sometimes for a long time. Quote, motherhood is often an exercise in delayed gratification. I feel that so keenly right now when the first two fight, when the middle is screaming because she's frustrated, when the oldest would rather look at the iPad than do anything else. And I just wonder, what am I doing here? My efforts feel useless, like I have nothing to show for myself. But I am planting seeds. They're small and they're hidden right now, but I am planting, dang it. So, seeds are such a great analogy for parenthood because you plant these seeds and you can't see. Like, are they germinating? Is anything happening? It is an exercise in patience. And that brings me to Matthew chapter 13. So this is where we find Jesus. He's at a lake and there's a huge crowd of people that want to hear what he has to say. And he's sharing parables. So they're stories that illustrate a greater principle. The one that he shares is sometimes called the parable of the sower. So the idea is that there's a farmer and he's casting seeds, he's planting seeds, and they're kind of like all over the place. Some of the seeds land where birds eat them up immediately, and some of the seeds land where the soil is shallow. So they sprout up really fast, but then when the sun comes out, they shrivel up and die. Some of the seeds grow where weeds grow alongside them, and so they don't produce a harvest. And then some of the seeds fall where the soil is good. And not only do they grow, they produce a crop that's multiplied 30, 60, or 100 times what was sown. So one of the things I love about seeing Jesus share stories is that the disciples who were with him all the time often are like, that is so smart, Jesus. We love it. We love what you did there. But could you just tell us a little more about what that means? We get it, but could you just tell us? And so they're asking him about this parable, and he explains that the seeds are like the good news, the kingdom of God, and that some people will hear the good news about the kingdom of God, and they'll love it. They'll receive it with joy, but they don't develop any roots, so they get distracted really quickly, and they fall away. Some people will hear the good news about Jesus, and they'll grow initially, but worries about this life and focus on wealth or distractions mean that they don't become fruitful, like the seeds with the weeds. And some of the seeds will fall on good soil, which refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. And that's the person who yields so much more than what was sown. So in the past, I struggled a little with this parable because I read it in a way that felt passive, like either you're good soil or you're bad soil, good luck. But then I look at parables like the ones in Luke chapter 15, where Jesus compares himself to a good shepherd, a shepherd who would leave 99 sheep to go find one that's lost. Or the parable of the prodigal son, this dad that his son has made choices to walk away, to learn things the hard way, have natural consequences, but he's waiting for his son's return. And when the son shows up, he runs out to hug him and then throw a party. That same chapter talks about a parable of a woman who has 10 silver coins. She loses just one, so she goes hunting everywhere to find that coin, and when she does, she has a party with her friends and neighbors. Jesus says in the same way, there's rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents. So it occurred to me, maybe this location of the seeds is more about timing. Maybe what we're talking about is like we should be casting seeds as much as possible. There are times when I'm trying to guide my kids on really like basic things, like we are kind to one another. We are patient with our siblings. We don't have to jump to arguing, and it doesn't feel like it registers. It's like those seeds with the birds. They're just gone. And do I give up then? Like, am I done because I planted that one seed and sorry you didn't get it? No, like we're planting all the time. We're trying to have more conversations about how we treat others. We're trying to model what it looks like to be kind and compassionate. So maybe I just need to keep planting until the seeds make it to that good soil. I was talking to my husband, Ryan, about this idea, and what I discovered is that I often want to, in the efforts of being a good farmer, I want to be, I don't like the word control. I want to be mindful of the environment. Like, that's my job. I should be weeding and I need to fertilize in order for these seeds to grow. And he stopped me and said, that's not farming, that's a greenhouse. And I realized he's totally right. Like when your kids are little and they're home with you, you have a lot more opportunity to like nurture those seeds, to keep practicing the skills you're working on, to talk to them about the Bible and matters of faith. But they can't live in a greenhouse forever. Over time, they have to start venturing out into the world. And I'll tell you what, I am a plant lady. Like I have a bunch of houseplants and love that. I have discovered, especially in the Midwest, and many of my friends have too, that I can keep plants pretty happy in the house, like as long as they're by a window and have the right conditions. But in the summertime, when I put them outside and they're getting all the sunlight and all the rain and like the environment that God designed them for, they just explode. And that is the incredible part about that tension as a parent of wanting to control the environment because we think that will actually help them the most, but it doesn't. Like we get a window of time where we get to nurture them in the greenhouse of our home, and then they start practicing it. They go to school or they join a team where they have a different coach that they are responsible for answering to, or they have their very first job as a teenager. Like we can't step in to bridge the gap in poor communication. They can come home and tell us about it, and we can practice together and talk about how we might learn from it to do something different in the future. But eventually, they start heading out of the greenhouse, right? So one example of how this has played out for us recently happened in the last year. My son, Clark, is 11 now. He was 10 at the time. We'd been praying for great friends for him at school, and he'd gotten to be buddies with this boy and his twin brother who happened to be believers, which is such a cool thing. And I got a text message from their mom. She said that their older sister had gone to this Bible camp before, and the boys were interested in going this year, but it would be way more fun if they had a friend. So would Clark ever be interested in that? And Clark was already in bed, so Ryan and I got the chance to talk about it first. And Ryan loved camp growing up. It was really an important place for his family, his parents, he and his brother. They went to camp. They were camp counselors. It was formative to them owning their faith. I was a scaredy cat about camp. I didn't like to be away from home. I had a hard time with that. So it was really the deciding factor for me in supporting Clark going to camp was I want him to be able to connect with these other Christian friends, and I want to give him the opportunity to make his faith his own, a way that he could be out of the greenhouse for a little while, but in an environment where he could learn from other believers. And so we talked to Clark. He wants to go. Great. We do all the packing. He's ready to go at the beginning of June, and he's off in the world. And I will tell you, like as a nervous, parent with their oldest going off, in this day and age, they like post pictures where parents can access it during the week. And so I was able to see that he was having a great time, and that really put my heart at ease, which is great. But he came back, and our whole family picked him up, and we took him out to lunch because we wanted to hear all the things. And I especially, like as a mom, had 1,000 questions. And if you've ever interacted with a 10, almost 11-year-old boy, you know that they are not prepared to answer all of the questions. So the things that he told us were like how awesome and hilarious his counselor was, and the games they played. They loved Capture the Duck, and things that made the experience unique to this particular camp, which is so great. And then we said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, like what would you give camp then? Would you go back? And he said 9.5. We're like, wow, like this was a really good experience. Okay, like, well, what could have made it better? And I kid you not, you guys. He looks at us and says, well, I love God and all, but morning chapel was just so long. I mean, evening chapel was great, but like, oh, we had all these things we wanted to go do. And if morning chapel could have been shorter, that would have been ideal. I'm like, we laughed about it, but I also was a little bit crushed because I had just been praying that Clark would have this like transformative encounter with Jesus, and he didn't come back saying like, I want to be baptized or anything like, that felt big. And so later on, Ryan and I are talking, probably again after kids are in bed, and I was sort of lamenting, like, I know, like he's just going into 5th grade, and that I'm glad he had a fun time, but I just really wanted him to have this like encounter with Jesus, and I'm disappointed. And Ryan, again, is very smart, and so he looked at me and said, Amanda, this is a slow cooker, not a microwave. It will take time. And I know he's right, but like I was a little disappointed. But yes, okay, we're planting seeds, and maybe he will want to go back to this camp in the future. It solidified his friendship with these boys. That's so great. We're like laying the foundation. But what was interesting was that over the summer, I'd see little sprouts. There was a Wren Collective song that he wanted to listen to and was like, this is my favorite song, and he knew all the words. And it was because he learned it at camp. And that meant that then we played it a lot over the summer. His siblings and I learned all the words as we'd be like driving to the next activity. His dad knows all the words because we'd play it at night when we were making dinner. Like it became an important part of our summer. And that was because of camp. Another thing that happened was later in the summer, we were spending some time with some neighbors, one in particular who Clark really loves and admires. But how do I say this tactfully? He uses language that our family does not, and so some of like the family culture is different. And Clark looks at me and says, can I talk to you privately later? And that felt honestly like some maturity in Clark anyway, that he didn't just like blurt out whatever he was thinking in front of the group. But I was like, okay, yeah, like we can talk. So later it's just the two of us, and he says to me, is it ever too late to go to heaven? Like, is it ever too late to follow Jesus? And I realized that he loves this person so much. He wants that person to go to heaven with him. Like, he cares about that person knowing Jesus. And it gave us this like beautiful opportunity to talk about how Jesus is always pursuing us, like the good shepherd, like the woman who lost her coin, like the father of the prodigal son. Like, no matter what point we are in our lives, Jesus is coming after us to show us his love. And it's never too late for us. It's never too late for us to share that good news with other people or to be praying for them. Like maybe you're not the one who gets to say those words to that person. It might not be the right thing for Clark to tell this like adult neighbor the good news about Jesus, but you can be praying for him. God is planting seeds in his life as much as he's planting seeds in Clark's and mine. So I don't know if those conversations would have happened if it hadn't been for camp, if it hadn't been for kids' church, if it hadn't been for the conversations we have at home. And even though I was looking for a certain type of maturity from Clark when he came home from camp, God is doing the good work of tending to Clark's heart and to his sister Hadley's and his brother Archer's. He is the one who can fertilize the soil and prepare the timing for when those seeds will be able to grow and produce good fruit. So I believe that our role as parents and as believers is to plant as many seeds as possible in our children's lives and in others. We're planting all the time, but we're not responsible for the outcome. And that's really hard for me to say. I'm saying it to myself as much as I'm saying it to you because I love my children so much. I am deeply invested in the outcome, but I have to trust God with that. I'm responsible for the obedience on my part. Then I have to pray for God to make my children's hearts fertile ground for those seeds to take root. I'll leave you with Philippians 1:6. It says, "He who began a good work in you, he who began a good work in your children, will be faithful to complete it." So if God loves our children enough to pursue them like a lost sheep or a missing coin or a son who's gone his own way, he can tend to the soil too so that their seeds of faith grow deep and they multiply.